being on the bottom part of the screen is the wall. Yeah, shorter one.
Next time I'll put in a word. Won't help.
I call to order the May 17th, 2023 special meeting of the Committee on Administrative Finance and Law. The time is now 6:30 PM. Ms. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Thompson.
Present.
Alderwoman Costa. Alderman Ayalon. Alderwoman Sanchez. Alderman Segura. Alderman Skirpo. Alderman Smedley.
Present.
You have 5, you've got a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Clerk, the first item on the agenda is item number 36058-1, to act upon the resolution regarding the general fund budget for the fiscal year 23 through 24. May I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Smedley,
I make a motion to accept and refer to the council with a favorable recommendation.
do I have a second? A second by Alderman Costa. Okay, at this time, I will call up different departments to speak on their budgets and to allow questions by the council. Members of the department, please be brief on your introduction tonight. First up is Justin Dorsey for the mayor's office.
Good evening. Justin Dorsey, Chief of Staff for the Mayor. Here to talk about the Mayor's Office budget. The increase this year is due large in part to the position of Chief Administrative Officer, or Chief Operating Officer. And happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Alam.
How are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
Yes. The budget of the mayor's office actually increased even before that. In the last few years, had increased more than any other department. Why so?
The previous year's budget, sir?
Yes, in the last few years. Every year it has increased.
Well, from 2022 to 2020, or the fiscal year 22 budget to the fiscal year 23 budget, the large increase there was due to a position coming out of economic development being put into our office's budget instead of the economic development budget. That's the largest increase.
The other question I have, let's say you decide not to fulfill the city manager position. Is that a consideration, given our debt increasing now from 9 to 10% a year, all the other pressures? Is that a possibility?
Well, just like anything else, it has to be posted like a civil service position, so it does have to go through that process. And once there's a qualified candidate that the mayor feels fits the job description, then it comes to you guys. So until it's approved by the council by a majority vote, then
Well, we have, across the department, we have vacancies. Some
Yes.
of them the city chooses not to fill.
Mhm.
There's a vacancy, the city is operating. Why not leave this vacancy
I don't
empty?
think it would be fair to the residents of the city of New Britain that voted in favor to put this position in, to at least not attempt to fill it.
The residents we talked about it many times, the residents were not even, had no idea what was in that question that was put, will you approve the rest of whatever the commission? The ones that are concerned about this is the mayor and the commission that proposed this. But the rest of the residents could care less, because whether they voted for or against, they had no idea what they were voting for. So it's really, give it a try. Try do a vacancy and see if there is a demonstration here for residents who demanding that we pay $250,000 more in our budget, demanding that. Give it a try.
It's not $250,000, sir. It's right
With
now
the benefits,
budget.
150,000 plus benefits.
Well, that's not even saying that that's what the salary is going to be. That's just budgeting because you don't know what you're going to get. It could be less. It could be
It
far
could be
less.
more.
It can't be more, because we only budgeted for 150.
Okay. So I would suggest, give it a try. It's been a vacancy so far. The city survived for 100 years or whoever without a city manager. It probably could survive without a city manager this year and in the next few years.
Well, and again, and the voters that did vote for this, and the overwhelming majority that voted for this, you know, it behooves them to at least have the opportunity presented.
The voters didn't know what they were voting about because it didn't say specifically city manager. It had a whole slot of things that they didn't even know. I know because I asked the voters when they were going to the poll, what's in there? And that question, and nobody knew.
5,718 people voted
Yeah,
yes.
they voted
as opposed
because-
to
Point of order,
4,400.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
if you're
Yeah,
asking
never
me
mind.
if
Question has
all
nothing to do with the budget.
5,718 didn't
Okay,
know,
let
I
me-
highly disagree with you, sir.
Let me just finish that. Is there, if you had to cut, like we have a big debt, if your department had to cut 4%, and I'd be asking this from every department, what would it be?
4%?
4%.
I mean, we're tight as it is, but, you know, we'd probably have to go down in, you know, marketing or one of those line items. But to save,
Okay.
you know, $4,000.
4% is 4,000, yeah. I think it's, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Mr. Dorsey? Thank you.
Costa?
Yes, Alderman.
The increase to the mayor's office, exactly what percentage of a tax bill would be affected by that increase?
Percentage of a tax bill or percentage of a mill?
Percentage of a mill, approximately what would each taxpayer pay?
So you're
How does
looking
that
at,
break down?
right, so
$2?
you figure $165,000 for the total increase to our office. I don't know, Jonathan. I mean, I could tell you the percentage of a mill real quick.
I'm just trying to demonstrate
You're talking
that
pennies.
impact. Pennies.
Pennies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's what I'm trying to demonstrate.
Thank you very much.
Pennies on the tax. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none at this time, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Dorsey, for your time. All right, up next, Mrs. Pekorski for Corp Counsel.
Good evening. Mary Pekorski, Assistant Corporation Counsel. So our budget increased by $71,000. In the salaries, there was a increase per the ordinances for the Corp Counsel. And then there were union increases for the paralegal position. And then there was a increase in the legal services and foreclosures.
Any questions? Alderman Alam?
Hello, how are you?
Alderman?
How long have you been in the
It's going to be 26 years this year.
26 years? Can you describe the changes in your department over the years as far as personnel?
Sure. When I started, there was 4 full-time attorneys, a corporation counsel, there was a paralegal, and there were 2 administrative assistants. So we had a total of 7. Currently, we have the 2 attorneys, 1 paralegal, and the corp counsel. And then we have a budgeted paralegal position, which we put out, and we're trying to figure out what to do with that.
So we all, throughout the 26 years you came, we used to have 4 attorneys,
4 full-time, yes.
full-time attorneys. Did they all have work?
Oh, yeah.
Or 2 of them were basically sitting and pushing some paper and, no?
Definitely not.
Has the responsibilities of your office reduced by half over the years?
No. I would say it's increased as far as the requests from departments and that type of thing. I think that from when I first started, we're more involved. From when I first started, we didn't handle labor negotiations in our office. That started under Mayor Tim Stewart, where I started doing labor negotiations along with the mayor's office. So that increased. I'm trying to think what else, but yeah, I would not say responsibilities decreased.
Okay. So what's the impact of less, something has to give, right? If four full-time lawyers were busy working. What, is there less services? Is there
No, I just think
what do
the
you,
two of us.
how do you do this?
The two of us are just busy. I mean, we're, we've been very busy over the last year. I mean, last year was the year that Joe Skelly retired, so until last year, we had 3 attorneys, but we manage. I mean, there's times when something has to wait. I can't get it done immediately. There's times when I stay late, like last night, to get something done, but we manage.
I think just for clarification too, workers' comp was subbed out, which did
I
help you. But-
apologize,
no,
that's
but
correct.
Everything else you have increased on.
That
I
is
can
correct.
testify to
So the workers' comp was farmed out, I believe, in 2014. So that used to be handled in-house. And I still sort of oversee it, and I get communications from our third-party administrator. But yes, Mike, Alderman, thank you for reminding me of that.
So, also another alternative I think you're probably doing is contracting out.
No, I mean, we typically have only contracted out for specialties, environmental. We have contracted out for foreclosures because the fees are paid actually from the action. The collection fees are added in there. We do have some cases that are contracted out to an attorney that are involving the police department. There was one involving the school department that were serious allegations, so we did farm out those. But as a norm, no, we do not farm out a lot of cases, and we never have. I mean, you have municipalities that have 15 attorneys, and they have a huge outside counsel fee. I think ours is reasonable, based on the number of attorneys that we have and everything that we do.
So, what's the cost of what's the typical annual contracting out that we?
Well, last year our budget was, I think, 67,000, but the issue is always we anticipate the cases that we know are being handled by outside attorneys, and sometimes other departments have issues that were unexpected. Last year we had charter revision, so the attorneys were paid out of our budget item. We do hire an outside attorney to do fire negotiations, which is going to be starting, so that comes out of our budget item as well. But last year, the budget was 67,000 for that line item.
So, would you say that annually it's a minimum 67,000? It could be more.
Yes,
So
depending on circumstances, depending on cases.
yes, it
Yeah.
varies, but I'm sure every year
Yes.
there is.
But I would say that was the same thing when we had 4 full-time attorneys, because you have issues that come up occasionally that are specialties, environmentals, like I explained. Cases that involve the death of a person, that type of thing.
So hiring another full-time position won't resolve the contracting out?
No, I don't believe so.
Not.
No, not in my opinion, no.
Okay. So I'll ask you then the question I asked before. If you were to cut 4% of your budget, the city decides we have too much debt and we have, go across departments, where would you go?
I think that's very difficult for our department because we've always been bare bones. Like I said, we've gone down to 2 attorneys, and I think that would be difficult. Over the years, we've barely had increases in our budget. So I think that would be difficult for our department. But obviously you have, line items where, but even like equipment and maintenance and those types of things those are fixed costs. So
Minimal, yeah.
there's not a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
We don't prefer to farm out cases, but when we have to, we do. And that's not really something that, we want to do, but it's required at times.
So you said you manage with 2 attorneys. Is that a standard, like cities our size, I don't know, Meriden or maybe others also have about the same staffing as we do?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking about. I know Waterbury, Hartford, they have more attorneys. I'm not sure about Meriden. They probably maybe have 1 or 2 more. I don't know. I would have to take a look at that. But I was originally employed in Waterbury when I came here, and they had at least 10 attorneys.
So will, I'm just thinking, if we had more attorneys, do you see I know you survive with this, but the more attorneys, would that improve the services the city provides to anybody, to the residents, to other departments? What impact might have of, say we had one more attorney, just for instance, let's take the minimum.
Yep.
What would be the benefit?
I mean, if you want to give us another attorney, that's certainly going to mean, a little bit of the work that the other attorney and I are handling is going to go to that attorney, and it's going to alleviate some of our caseload. But I don't think right now I've heard any complaints about services from our office. And like I said, we're very involved with department requests. I can't even tell you how often we're contacted by departments on different things, employment issues. And I have not had a situation where anyone's complained that they're not getting services. We may miss something, like I may miss an email sometimes, but, I always end up catching up. And we also provide services to the Board of Ed. Contract review for them. Recently, we've been, consulted on a couple of questions that they have. They call me, so certainly you want to give us another attorney. We wouldn't turn it down.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman.
Alderman Smedley?
Thank you. I just wanted to add excessive work that your department does. You just hit the school board that I was going to add, because I call you 3 times a day. And the small claims, this council authorized you to settle small claims for us.
Like the claims, yes. You
Up
mean like the
to a
claims
$5,000
filed.
amount before they previously would all come to the committee, but we transferred that authorization to your office.
That is correct. Thank you.
I would just like to add too, over my 35 years with the city, the streamlining, I didn't see any effect to the services that were rendered to the city. You guys do an excellent job, so.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Means a lot.
Any other questions?
Thank you all.
Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Porsky. Have a great night. All right, next up, Mrs. Gard. For the Human Resources Office. Any questions? Alderman Alam?
I thought, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just maybe give us a little overview of your department, how many people and your expenses, and perhaps your priorities.
Sure. The Human Resource Department consists of Civil Service and Human Rights and Opportunities. We have one Human Rights and Opportunities officer, and his responsibility basically is receiving complaints of alleged unlawful discrimination matters and general housing complaints. He also provides procedural guidance on those matters. The Civil Service Office is myself and a benefits administrator, and we handle the recruitment and testing, employee and labor relations, employee trainings, benefit administration, Department of Transportation, drug and alcohol testing, and fire and police drug testing.
So how many staff, can you, besides the?
There's one Human Rights Opportunities Officer, and then there's a benefits administrator and myself. So there's 3.
So you're a department of 3?
We're a department of 3. We do have a part-timer right now who just handles the Medicare and for our retirees, and that position will be leaving in June, the end of June.
So if you had to cut 4%, what would it be?
We're pretty lean. A lot of our expenses are tied basically to like recruiting, because we have to have the physicals and the drug screens and the psychological testing for police and fire. And as you know, we've had a very high turnover with our police department. So it's about $1,200 per entry candidate coming in for their psychological and their medical evaluation before they even come to start their academy. So I guess if we had to cut 4%, I guess it would be probably, our training.
Okay, okay. So you're the smallest department in the city?
We are the smallest department.
So on a typical day, you do testing? Is that what you mostly do?
No, we have moved most of our testing, like our fire testing, when we test for fire openings. We have about between 500 and 700 candidates that come in to test. So we do that over a weekend at the high school usually. And then we do our oral panels on the weekend as well. And with the police department, because we're so busy, we've had to move that to evenings. So toward the end of the day, we start our testing at 3 o'clock. And it also helps with our entry-level candidates because most of them work full-time jobs. So they're able to come in to test in the evening rather than taking a day off from work because everyone in the state is vying for the same pool of candidates. So.
Okay.
All right, anybody
Thank you.
else? All right, just for clarification too, Alderman, most of the day, I know we're taken up with labor relations stuff in your department before it gets to any lawyers or anything, so that's what a lot of their stuff does, and they do it well. Very streamlined department. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Next up, we have Mr. Bernacki for the Town Clerk Office.
Good evening, all the persons. Mark Bernacki, Town and City Clerk and Registrar of Vital Statistics. I was going to make a formal presentation starting on page 213 of the budget book, but you folks all have that information, and you're all sort of veterans of the council, so I'll keep it brief based on some of the questions I've heard. We currently have 7 full-time people and 1 part-time person working between 10 to 12 hours a day. We are finally up to a full complement of 7 people. We did have a rash of retirements where we were short for an extended period of time, and we're finally back up to full complement. The newest person was just hired February of this year, so we now have all 7 people in the office. I do have 1 person on long-term disability, so we're short again, but the part-timer is helping us during the crunch times. So that's basically what our staffing is. If we were to look at a 4% cut, we'd probably have to lose 1 person. Everything else that is paid for by the town clerk's department, we have to adhere to state statutes. In the budget book, there's, I believe, 3 pages of revenue items, all controlled by state statutes in terms of what we can charge the public for particular services that we provide to them. And the opposite is true for the expenditures. The biggest expenditure we have is to pay for our software that we have, which is the COT land recording system. We're also required by state statute to audit our land records. So we have Don Lukowski coming in to audit our books, and you folks had just approved his contract recently. So those are the 2 biggest items that we have. We also pay for the ballots for elections. So we work in conjunction with the Registrar of Voters to come up with a ballpark figure, because we did go from the old ticky machine to the actual paper ballots, so now we're paying for that privilege of having the tabulator scanner there. So we always have a best guesstimate as to what we need for that, and we try to manage that as best we possibly can on that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Smith?
through you, can you just touch upon the revenue side of your department a little bit more?
Sure. Well, there's no surprise that the revenues have really exploded since the pandemic. The biggest revenues that we receive is basically the conveyance tax for people that sell their property. The city of New Britain makes 0.5% of that sale for both commercial and residential property. So because of the very hot real estate market, not just in New Britain, but nationwide, we've experienced a lot of revenue coming in for us to record. So we're getting revenue from the recordings as well as the conveyance tax. So those are the 2 biggest revenue drivers that we have. Over my tenure as town clerk, we've also automated as much as we possibly can. So we have several portals, some with the state and some that we purchase to provide 24/7 order entry. say people want a copy of their birth record and they live in Georgia. They can log on to the website for our vendor, which is Permidian. They could log in and basically fill out an application. They could pay for that online. If they want next day turnaround, they click a button to say, give me a second day service through the post office. We will then receive that request the next day. We'll process it and get it out in the mail the same day. So that's been very, very popular. We also have all of our land records available online 24/7, and people that need to have a hard copy don't have to come into City Hall. They can also print it out at their office or their home for a whopping $1 per page for that. And we've seen a significant increase in that because of the convenience factor. And because of the pandemic, a lot of people are not working from home and not in the office, so there's what we've seen is a good increase in the number of copies, because in talking with Gennaro Bizzarro as an example, he says, geez, it's so convenient, I'm online, I could get a copy of it. Well, maybe I'll get a couple extra copies, and we've seen an increase because of the fact that the convenience factor is there and people actually order more when they are online using that portal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alderman Olam?
Yes, thank you. Can you, early voting is coming.
Yes, sir.
What did it mean to your department?
Early voting really wouldn't touch our department as much as it would the registrar of voters, because they're involved with managing that particular site. The only impact it would have on me would be to print the ballots for them, because the state's requiring that we have a different type of ballot. So we have a regular ballot, so when you go to your polling place on election day, it's usually a white ballot. If you order a absentee ballot, that's usually in yellow. Election day registration is usually in a cherry or a salmon color, and we'll have to determine what color we'll need for early voting. So it'll be different color ballots. How many we need, who knows? It's the new shiny object, and depending on how it's set up, and I believe the Common Council also has to authorize or at least hold a public hearing, from what I saw in the statutes, on whether we go with more than one polling location. That would also drive the cost to have to staff more than one location for 14 days prior to the election.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, just for clarification, for my knowledge, I know a lot of stuff can be done online. Is there anything still requiring a wet signature? I know like death certificates still require that for you guys. Is there anything else requiring or most can be done online now, because I know you've modernized that department?
Most of the documents still require a wet signature. During the pandemic, the governor had an executive order that allowed for digital facsimiles of a signature, but we're back to regular mode. The emergencies were taken off, so it's still a requirement that we do have wet signature.
Okay.
The Town Clerks Association has been pushing statute change to allow for more like remote notarization that we can do off-site with different notaries from different states. But that's held up in the legislature. So Connecticut is late to the party on that, but a lot of other states are doing that.
All right, thank you. I do know my wife's the funeral director, so I do know they're
Yes.
late on the party on that one.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Great,
very
thank
much.
you.
Have a good night, Mr. Bernanke. All right, next up, we have Mr. Pavlak and Mr. Gostin for the Register of Voters Office. Dziękuję.
I guess I'll kick it off. The reason I gave you those is because since January, there's been some, well, to me, not significant changes, but there are. My budget request is $27,000 more than it was back in January, largely due to early voting and a couple other things. So I'll open up questions, and Pete, if you want to say anything.
Just briefly, I had guesstimated, along with the early voting part that Lucian just talked about, and I don't necessarily think that it's going to deviate from that. but we really don't know. Everything's up in the air. Is it one location? Is it two? If it's 2 or 3, then we got multiples of the number of people we'll need. The budget could be blown sky high in that, but, you know, the increase in my budget for this year is approximately 63,000 more than it was last year, and roughly 58 to 60,000 of it is all due to two things, both early voting and also we have 3 different elections instead of 2, as my party normally has in any particular year.
All right, thank you. And just for clarification on this is another state to change with no money coming down. It's for the public. This is just going to be an unfunded mandate again. We're going to have to absorb the cost, basically.
Well, a lot of it will probably be unfunded, but there is talk in the bill of some kind of funding, whether it will be adequate and how they would divvy that up across the state. We just don't know what the final number is at this point.
All right, well, from our mouths to God's ears, let's hope our representatives get us the money.
Alderman, can I just interject? They're predicting 900,000 for the whole state, so
Okay. All right.
that's
fair
a,
enough.
that's a joke. And it's what I saw in writing.
Yeah. We'll see what comes down. All right, any questions? Alderman Alam?
So, can you remind us how many staff you have? Maybe something about, because I remember there was issues with training and all of this stuff. So maybe just remind us how many people you have a regular staff, but also how many people you hire for each elections.
All right, our staff consists obviously of ourselves. We each have one full-time person and another part-time, and that is it throughout the year. Poll workers you're talking about, every election, if it's citywide, we're both hiring 100, 110 people on each side. So multiply it twice, okay? And that's what our staff is. We have to pay them increasing amounts because of state law, increasing the minimum wage. So we go up a little bit regarding their hourly wage, and that adds to some of the costs.
What's the hourly wage for poll workers?
Well, we have 4 different tiers. If you're a ballot clerk or someone just handling or watching the ballots, a tabulator tender, they call them, this year I believe it's going to $16 from $15, because that's the minimum wage, I believe. Official checkers would be up $1 from there, so that would go to about 17. Our assistant registrars, because they have higher duties in overseeing the official checkers, they're going to go to 19, and our moderators, who oversee everything, will be 21.
21, okay. So I guess I still ask you, same question I ask for everybody else. If you had to cut 4%, for to minimize any influence on your, what would it be?
Minimize influence?
Minimize the mitigation of that, but cut 4% is something that,
Well, I could suggest cutting about 25% and not have early voting, but that takes away Lucian's
I
line.
made that wisecrack before.
I know you're
that's
jokers,
Lucian.
both of you, yeah.
Yeah,
Let's see.
if you wanna,
Any thoughts?
Alderman, let me just, as someone who was very surprised at the volume of work that is done up in that office at the cost to the city, 4%, and no different than Alderman, or former Alderman and current Town and City Clerk Bernacki was talking about, 99% of our stuff is dictated by the state. But yeah, we get nothing from the state in return. You know what? We may get a surprise in January, or we may get new machines, and then we got to come back here and ask you for more training money. So these are the things that are thrown at us. They're curveballs. 4% we couldn't run elections with, and we'd be in deficit positions, and we'd come back to you at the end of the year and say, hey, we were deficit here, we were deficit there, we need to make it up. So that's, and again, as someone who's been around and who's, for now, I was elected treasurer in '87, so I've been around for a while. I do want to end, if this is the end, with all due respect to the members of the Common Council, you guys don't know how frugal we are in this city. And I have had the opportunity to serve in many capacities and watch many departments. We have some great people working for the city. And they're the ones that make it work. And you ought to be proud of them, because even tonight, the ones I heard are just, Mary with 2 lawyers, and Mark, what he's got downstairs, I know the job inside and out. And what we have, we are frugal. And if you take away 4%, we'll be back saying we're in deficit, we need to replace it. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen.
Good, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Mr. Koenig and Mr. Perugini for the assessor's office.
Good evening, everybody. Mike Koenig, the assessor here in the city of New Britain. Just a quick overview of our budget. This year's budget, if you see the bottom line, it's down by just under 17% from last year. Reason for that is if you look at our professional services line, it's down significantly because we're not paying for a revaluation any longer in this coming fiscal year. It was a 2-year project cost, so that's no longer in there. There's still money in professional services this year for to pay for appraisal reports and expert testimony and any court cases that evolve because of the revaluation. So that's there. We have a staff of 8 people in our office, including myself. 8 has been the number for a number of years. I've been here for just about 25 years. When I started, there was 9 people, and we were reduced down to 8 people somewhere around 2005, 2004, 2005, and we've been that way since. Most of the items that you see on our budget, these are all contractual items as far as anything from salaries down to data processing. These are all fixed costs. We really don't have much wiggle room into what we can pay for or not pay for there. Alderman, I know you're asking everybody about a 4% cut. Doing the quick math on that from the budget that I presented, that would be another 34,000. I forget the number, but I'd have to say that have to come out of staffing because we just don't have anywhere else to cut because even with the professional services item, if we go to court and we have litigation, courts order professional appraisals to be done, single property appraisals in any kind of litigation. That's something that you have to hire an MAI for, and those type of appraisals are rather expensive, so.
Yes, Alderman.
I became aware that the legislator just, I think it passed to enable and make it easier for people to pay in credit card and for their utility, the city utilities and so on. You aware of that?
I'm not one that collects the revenue. That would be more the tax collector's office. So I'm not aware of that legislation.
Okay, so it's not, it's not to you. Okay.
Yes.
So maybe just kind of maybe clarify what's your department role?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Our role is to discover, list, and value, and produce the annual grand list for the city of New Britain. We have, in the municipality, for everybody's knowledge, we have 17,000 just about taxable real estate accounts, about another 500 exempt accounts. We have about 2,000 business personal property accounts, so desk chairs, computers, those types of things are taxable. We have 45,000 accounts that are taxable motor vehicles on the regular grand list, and then when you have the supplemental grand list, we have about approximately another 10,000 accounts that come on that list. So there's about 75,000 accounts that we deal with annually. We're also in charge of, every time you look at our office, if you're looking at real estate, we value the real estate through reval, but in the interim years, if permits are pulled, new construction happens, we work with the building department, we get permits, we go out in the field, we list those properties and change values based on what they do. We take the deeds that are filed in the town clerk's offices that are in regards of transfers, and we transfer ownership of property, so people's tax bills are accurate to that extent. Again, personal property, that's self-declaration, but so we have a process of going out and discovering new business accounts, removing business accounts that have left town. We work in conjunction with our Assessors Association and the DMV to produce an annual grand list of motor vehicles. So we're a library of sales to a lot of taxpayers. People use our website all the time to obtain sales information, ownership information. And of course, some of the biggest things, we apply exemption programs for people, elderly tax credits, veterans benefits, blind, disabled. Applications come to our office, and then, of course, a lot of these other programs that are either voted on by the council for tax benefits, they're all administered through our office.
So the people have to, if somebody's disabled, have to apply to your office to get a tax relief?
Right, if they're disabled by the Social Security Administration, they would have to provide a documentation, an SSA 1099. We'd fill out a form, and if they have property, if they own property, or they have a spouse that owns property, they could be eligible to get a basic benefit off the assessment of their property. If their income is below a certain level, then they can get a larger benefit. Yes.
It's good to know. Thank you for your comprehensive overview.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? None, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Koenig. Have a great evening.
Welcome.
Okay. Next up, we have Ms. Boguslawski and Mr. Perugini for the Tax Department.
Good evening. Before I start, does anyone have a question for me? Aaron?
Questions, Alderman Alam?
Same as before, perhaps you can elaborate on, your staffing,
Yeah.
what you do, maybe your priorities, and if you had to do a 4% cut, what would it be?
Okay. Very much, excuse me. Other departments like the town clerk and the registrars and assessors, a lot of what we do is governed by state statute. We're legally required to put out legal notices in a daily paper twice a year. That's an expensive cost right there in and of itself. We have contractually obligated staff. We're finally up to a decent level of 10 people. We work in concert with the water sewer department because we're now like a revenue office, water sewer billing, property tax. Let's see. Right now we're working on updating new owners because we also track escrows and bank coding. For the bills that are going out in July, we need to track what bank escrows for what property, give them the information so that the proper people get the bills. But basically, the office is responsible for administering, advising our customer base on anything that relates to property taxes, motor vehicle taxes, business taxes, so on and so forth. And water sewer bills, that's become a very big challenge with the Clean Water Fund, trying to explain to a customer what that's for, why we're responsible for paying it. So it's been a huge learning curve the last few years, but we're finally up to a full staff. We got two gentlemen that started a few months ago. We got a good balance, and I think we're finally at a good footing going forward.
So you just mentioned things I heard in the assessment office, like the car tax and others. So
Yes.
what is how are you different than the assessor office?
They generate the grand list of the values of the cars. We get the data. We then bill the customers for them.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're required legally to send out intent to lien when it comes to real estate, delinquent statements when it comes to personal property and motor vehicle, bills in general, whether you receive or not, you're legally responsible for it, but we're required to mail it out, and postage is a big cost these days, but that's something we can't cut there.
So now you're doing the water billing. Before that, the water department did it, right?
Well, we've been doing it now since we consolidated in 2012.
Oh,
But we're doing quarterly now. We bill like, I can't tell you the actual metrics of it, but we're still billing monthly, but a quarter of the city. So it's,
I know each one of us gets now a quarter bill instead of
Yes.
a half a year
Yes.
bill, right?
Yep, we've finally been into that cycle for at least a year, so I think people are expecting it
How's
now.
that working, that quarter system rather than twice a year for you
Well,
guys?
I think the main intent, I know a lot of people had wanted it, but it was to address if you do have an issue with consumption, a running toilet, something leaking, we can find it sooner than later. So before your bill accumulates to a crazy amount and you have no recourse. That's why the quarter billing came into place.
Okay. So if you had to do 4% cut, what would it be?
It'd have to be staff, unfortunately. I'd like to say we don't put a legal notice in the local paper, but we're required to. A lot of what we do is governed by state statute.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else?
Okay, up next, where are we? Up next, we have Mr. Perugini for the Finance Department.
Hello, everybody.
Good
Good
evening.
to see you again. Just give you a rundown of the finance office. For the budget requested, it's actually a reduction from last year's budget of around 5.8%. And that's mainly because we've had massive turnover from retirements and people retiring due to medical or family medical reasons. So that's the biggest one. Most of my office budget is salaries, and you'll see that it decreased.
Okay, any questions? Alderman Costa?
Mr. Perugini? Inflation rates are up by 5% as of May.
Yeah.
I check it all the time.
The CPI
Makes me a little
index.
anxious, actually. And most of these departments haven't increased up to 5%. So we're actually with an increase in inflation, but not necessarily a 5% increase for every department that's coming forward tonight and last night and tomorrow night. They're already beneath probably where they need to be given inflation rates. And with a 4% decrease, what we're actually looking at when we're looking at that question is a 9% decrease because of inflation rates. So I just want everybody to understand that the city runs lean and efficiently. And I particularly understand that. I understand how we operate. I visit Mark and I've seen the registrar's office. I visit Cheryl and her team. I've been to Mr. Perugini's office. I understand how hard we're working here, how much we contribute. We work very efficiently. We find, Mr. Bernacki is constantly finding efficiencies and ways to do things better. And I think that's the spirit of what we do here at City Hall. So when we ask for a 4% increase, we're actually asking for a 9% increase because there's a 5%, or when we're asking for a 4% decrease, we're asking for a 9% decrease because we're working in currently a 5% increase in inflation at this time. And that could change next month. It could be 7% next month. It all depends on what the economy looks like. Earlier in the year, it was 8%. So I appreciate, all that you did. Mr. Amos did a nice job with all of the departments and the Finance and Taxation Commission. So I was able to sit in on a lot of that. I have a lot of this information already, the details and the explanations from all the department heads. And I'm grateful for all of the work everybody puts into this. This is really, really hard work to get to this place without a lot of flexibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other people? No? All right, Mr. Perugini, thank you. And again,
Thank
thank
you.
everybody that came tonight. You guys do great work for the city. We all appreciate it very much. Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, the motion is to refer with a favorable recommendation. Do all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. The next item on the agenda is item 36095-1 to act upon resolution regarding special revenue funds, enterprise funds for the fiscal year 2023 to 2024. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Smedley?
make a motion to accept and refer to the full council with a favorable recommendation, item 36059-1.
Have a second? Okay. All right, is there any discussion on this?
Is there anybody from the city that's gonna give an overview? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Perugini, would you be able to answer that question? Sure. The resolution regarding special revenue funds and enterprise funds?
But, sure, shoot, what's your question?
Yes, can you say for the audience, for the people, what's the purpose of a special revenue funds? Why do we need, don't we have a budget? I'm just a plain,
Sure.
dumb kind of thing.
Okay, I'll give a brief overview on it. Special revenue funds are funds that are set up for a specific purpose. I'll try not to go too much into the accounting jargon on it, but it's to run a specific purpose, such as like the Stanley Golf Course, by not using taxpayer money. Usually fees are associated with it. So like Stanley Golf Course, no, I'm not gonna, well, dog fund, yeah, there's fees, but not enough to actually cover that. But each one of these are set up for a special purpose in order to do it. Later on, you'll run into internal service funds, which are more for like fringe benefits or a specific purpose where the city has to provide them. And then the last piece is enterprise funds, which are supposed to be self-sufficient. That's the whole purpose, and run like a business.
Just for clarification, that would be like our water department, basically.
Yes, that would be the water department and the clean water fund.
So let's take the golf course as an example. It's supposed to be then, as you said, this special fund, special revenue fund is supposed to be right?
Nope. Special revenue funds are just a specific purpose. The enterprise need to be self-sufficient because that's the business. So like the dog fund is not a self-sufficient fund. It's we charge what we can for adoption fees, but ultimately the state charges us a lot of money to run the program, even though the town clerk's office does more than a majority of it, and we have to remit it to the state. So it's one that we're forced to have on state statute, but it's not enough to maintain an animal control officer as well
Right,
as.
but the Stanley Golf Course is not really self-sufficient, right? The city has to put in money.
No, the city does not at the moment. The fees have been doing amazing, especially after COVID. They've been able to cover their costs.
But we just took a bond, a municipal bond, to pay for
That's
development
for
of a golf course.
pavilion, right? To create a pavilion, I believe it was set up for 500, but not the daily operations. This Fund 201 is for the operations of the golf
These
course.
are all for daily operations.
Yeah, for the annual operations of specific purposes.
I think we were exposed a little bit. Fairview Cemetery. Is that cost the city money, or the city gets
Yes.
its value back from somebody?
No, that costs the city money in order to operate it.
Is that a common practice from cities and towns to operate private cemeteries?
If there was a cemetery set up, yes, usually that's the case. It's not enough in order to cover groundskeeper fees for what they'd be able to charge.
Just for quick clarification, that cemetery is not private, it's city-owned.
Yes,
'Cause all the-
city-owned,
You just said
thank you.
private, so it's a city-owned cemetery. It's our property.
There's a list here of different funds. Can you maybe, are they all the same or different? Can you maybe classify the types that we're looking at here? Because, for example, there's a medical self-insurance fund. This is probably much different than sewer operating fund. So can you explain the different types of?
Sure. So the groupings, the ones that are in the 200s, the 201 all the way to the 290, those are the special revenue ones. Those are designated for a specific purpose. The 700s are internal service funds, which are, there's no money to really bring in order to cover it, but it's more benefits in order, we're self-insured. So what we have to do is we put money in and pay the actual claims against it. So those are just internal service funds. And then the last one are the two enterprise funds, water and clean water, which are the business type ones.
And that brings me to my next question about self-insurance, because I remember being on the school board, and that was a big issue
Yep.
about not funding enough self-insurance, so what is the current situation of the self-insurance funds?
I believe there's adequate reserve in the, in both the Board of Ed and the city. Yeah, off the June 30th, 21 audit, there was, the Board of Ed has a balance of 18 million in theirs, and then the city had about 10 million in order to help cover costs.
And is there a state statute requires a certain amount?
No, but you want to be able to cover your costs. So on average, the city runs around 10 to 12 million. So it all depends on claim years, and the Board of Ed can go 18 around there. So it's because we're self-insured, we pay the actual claims, and so some years could be low, like during COVID, nobody wanted to go to the hospital. But then after everything came, then everyone starts to go, and then you have a higher than anticipated claims. So there's an ebb and a flow to it, where one moment you may think you're fine, and then the next you may have a huge thing of claims.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, Mr. Perugini, so the public knows, we pay all the funds, bills that come into us, but we are, for catastrophe, we do have, somebody gets cancer, we do get that covered after, what, $250,000?
Yes, there's individual stop losses as well as an aggregate stop loss. I think it's around 200,000 on an individual basis, but then sometimes you have higher claims if it's pregnancy with multiple children. Then each one is their own thing. But yes,
Just so the public knows, we do have, catastrophe insured, so, okay.
yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Perugini.
Thank you.
Okay. We have, this is as a motion to send it with a favorable recommendation back to the council. We've had discussion on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. And the next item on the agenda is item number 36060-1, act upon a resolution regarding the budget appropriation for capital improvement program fiscal year 2023 to 2024, the LoCIP money. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Smedley.
make a motion to accept and refer to council with a favorable recommendation, item 36060-1.
I have a second by Alderman Costa. Is there any discussion on this? Alderman Ayala.
This is obvious. This is actually for the first time I looked over this, because this is really the future plans of the city of New Britain, and I never really took the time to examine it in detail, and it's amazing to see all the different future plans that not necessarily are materialized, but that's the plans. So maybe, is there somebody in the city that can talk to us about how this planning works out, how these?
I can actually talk a little bit, since I work for the city. Mr. Perugini, you can back it up. But a lot of this is done through like the Park and Rec, the engineering department. They go over, they all have their wish lists. They break it down on what the costs are. Then the finance department gets involved once the money comes in. But it's usually, it's a wish list from each department of how they generate the overall list of what they'd like to see done.
Yeah, are you referring to the whole book? Or the resolute, or the?
No, it's all how everything comes into play in the book.
No, there is a bunch of projects here, and how are they staggered? Why 2027 one and the other 2024? All of these, how that figured out in the amount.
Okay, there's two reasons why we do it. One is Article 10 in the charter, and I think Article 11 in the charter, where we have to do a 5-year plan of capital projects. And so that's why we do the book. But the other part is for LoCIP, the State Office of Policy and Management requires a 5-year plan. So when we're putting in for projects after the mayor proposes and council puts in for it, we submit the resolution along with an application and for the state to approve. And so we have to provide them with the book and then show them the actual page in the book, as well as the signed and certified resolution for whatever we're applying for.
So if I understand it correctly, you ask each department to submit a 5-year plan, and then you compile it together.
Yes.
Um,
And we
And-
use last year's book as the starting point in the current year, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every year.
Because I think theoretically, we know that the budget is really a reflection of our priorities. But here, you can really see it. So for example, if I was to do it in one of the department, I would have a list about, creating a tree plan, a complete tree plan for the city of New Britain, and it would go into this page, and then based on whatever the estimate that the money will cost, and it will be just like we have a 5-year plan for road, improvement or sidewalks. We decide what we want to improve. Of course, water, we have to do it because of federal requirement. So otherwise we probably wouldn't have done it, even though it's falling apart. But so this is really revealing, and I actually believe that the Common Council needs to look at this more in detail and say what's here and what's not there. And because from my 6 years, the budget we get is not what we pass. Very rarely any changes happen here. And I think if there's anything changes, we, the Common Council, need to look at this in detail and ask ourselves, is this what we want? What's missing? What's in here that we support? Maybe some of them we feel need to go earlier. I can think of Outlook. I know that there was a flood there a few years ago, and the Outlook improvement here, it's only in, I think, 2 or 3 years down the road. And I don't know if I'm be willing to wait and see another flood before it gets fixed there. So that's my statement about this. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Perugini, just sort of public's knowledge, LoSiP has gotten much more strict on what they pay for nowadays over the last couple of
Yes.
years. Just so you know, so
Yes.
a lot of our wants don't get covered anymore that we used to want.
Yeah, they've become extremely stringent on everything. You have to have American Institute of Architect forms when you're sending in for invoices, and you have to go through a lot more hurdles than you had a few years back. And so,
All right, and just for Alderman's, just for your knowledge, while I was working for the city, we applied for a $10,000 grant for the east side of trees. We got 30-something trees. They were planted, and we negotiated with Eversource to get 67 trees, and most of those have been planted around the city too, just so you know, over the last year.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about a
Overall
complete,
plan, but
a
it's
complete plan that we
It's a-
don't.
It's a start, though, so
Yeah.
we got something.
thank you.
We've had discussion on this item. All those, we're gonna send it back with a favorable recommendation to the council. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Nay, ayes have it. May I have a motion to adjourn? A motion to adjourn by Alderman Elam, seconded by Mr. Alderman Smedley. Time is now 7:33. We are adjourned.